Donald Trump and his Department of Justice just made a stunning confession, perhaps an incriminating confession, that there are over 1 million documents that have not even been reviewed in connection with the Epstein files and that they need to start reviewing it. Now, this follows a report by the MeidasTouch network. We posted a video about it on Wednesday at 4 a.m. The day before, we posted a story about it on our social media accounts where we said in our review of what has been produced so far, there are references to at least 1.2 million additional records that were with the Southern District of New York prosecutor's office. They were the ones who prosecuted Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell that don't seem to have been produced or reviewed even by the Department of Justice. And now Donald Trump and the DOJ are admitting it. Just a reminder, the Trump regime, the White House, has actually taken over the Department of Justice's social media account. So when you now see posts from the DOJ, it's actually coming from Donald Trump's White House. And here is what they posted on Christmas Eve. They said, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the FBI have informed the Department of Justice that they have uncovered over 1 million more documents potentially related to Jeffrey Epstein's case. The DOJ has received these documents from SDNY and the FBI to review them for release in compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, existing statutes, and judicial orders. We have lawyers working around the clock to review and make the legally required redactions to protect victims, and we will release the documents as soon as possible. Due to the massive volume of material, this process may take a few more weeks. The department will continue to fully comply with federal law and President Trump's direction to release the files. That's actually not what his direction is. You've already violated the federal law. The Epstein Transparency Act required that all documents, every one of them, be produced by December 19th. That was violated. And as we pointed out at the MeidasTouch network during our 4 a.m. Pacific time video that was released on Wednesday, and our reporting the day before on Tuesday evening, this group of documents was known to the Southern District of New York, who I am confident informed the Trump regime about it. The Trump regime has always known about these documents. Trump has one of his lackeys running the SDNY. And the SDNY knew about these documents back on October 30th of 2020. How do we know? Well, it was referenced in some of the emails that were produced, even though all of the documents that were produced weren't supposed to be, weren't actually produced, rather. So here's one of the messages from the Epstein file dump that was released. You see EFT A13397. You see that right there. October 30th, 2020. And it's this is an email from prosecutors to each other. And here's what it says. Good morning, Ed. It's Edward Tyrell, who's a prosecutor at the United States Attorney's Office, to a contractor over there, someone who's likely doing document review. Following up on our earlier phone conversation, a hard drive with the following production is being sent to SDNY, that's Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutor's office in SDNY. FedEx with the following productions in the U.S. via Epstein Workspace. That's likely the software that they used, which housed all of these Epstein documents for the Southern District of New York prosecutions, okay? And it goes 1 through 7, and it lists these documents. We call them Bates numbers in the legal profession, but they're the document numbers on the bottom right hand of these documents. And they have the prefix SDNY PROD, so Southern District of New York prod, production 008, 009, 0010, 011. 011 has is a 6-part production. Then there's 012, 013, and then there's 014 right there. And here's what the email says. There are approximately 1.2 million records currently being imaged. The images will be available on Monday, November 2nd, 2020 at the earliest. The production of the records will begin as soon as the images are available in the workspace. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And it says, thanks. So here is what I wrote in response to that. It said, this email from Epstein's SDNY prosecutors in 2020 suggests that there are approximately 1.2 million records being imaged in just this one hard drive. There are likely other hard drives as well. I would not be surprised if there are actually tens of millions of records. Now, in case you don't know my background, I was a litigator for about 13 years before doing MeidasTouch full time. And I was involved in prosecuting cases in civil litigation against massive fraudulent companies and Ponzi schemers, and I did other cases as well, but I've dealt with massive document productions with tens of millions of records, terabytes of documents, we would call it, and there would be enough documents to fill up multiple skyscrapers. That's how we would try to describe it to juries during these trials that I would be involved in. And so my own background led me to believe, as I'm reading emails like this, that there's probably not just 1.2 million records. And by the way, records is different than documents. So one record might be 10 pages. One record might be 86 pages. Okay. It may be 1,000 pages, right? Now, there could be duplicates, but we would have software as litigators that dedupes, that gets rid of the duplicates. This is all common stuff and easy to do. I would do million document productions with teams of 5 associates. So if the DOJ has thousands of lawyers at their disposal and also AI tools right now that can help do easier document review to do the deduplication, this should be pretty easy stuff right here. And this is just SDNY 008 to 0014. Could there be 001 to 007? Could there be 0014 to 0050? And this is just the US v. Epstein workspace. What about the US v. Maxwell workspace? What about Southern District of Florida? What about other criminal investigations that may be taking place? What about all of the civil cases? What about all of that? And you may be saying, how could there be millions of documents just for one person? It wasn't one person. Epstein was a racket. It was a criminal sex trafficking ring involving a lot of people. And we're talking about, just think about what the banking records could look like with all of these transactions. The banking records alone could be millions of pages if you actually delve into that level of complexity. So when I heard originally that there were only 100,000 records, that never made sense to me. Having litigated big cases, I think it's 5-10 million records, not documents. So I think that the universe is actually significantly bigger than this, because my analysis, which then the DOJ confessed that they actually have these records in response to our reporting, I may add. And by the way, please subscribe to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel, right? Like, this is why independent news is so important, because we break this down where no one else is really doing it, and it has an impact. The DOJ had to confess. Trump had to confess. There are millions of other records out there. But yeah, no, I think that there's probably a ton of other records that are out there in addition to this that absolutely need to be produced.
So this is one of the stories that should be leading every single newscast, and somehow it's barely breaking through. So give me just 1 minute for this important report. Quietly, the Trump administration is dismantling the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado. Most people have probably never heard of the research lab, but almost everyone has depended on it. This is the lab that helps scientists fly into hurricanes, that builds the weather models meteorologists use to predict floods, wildfires, and deadly heat waves, that gives communities early warnings that literally save lives, and now the White House is moving to dissolve it. A top Trump official called it, quote, one of the largest sources of climate alarmism, and accused it of being woke for its research. I'm not making that up. They literally called it woke for that kind of research. So they've decided to gut it. Climate scientists are horrified right now. One called the research lab the, quote, global mothership of climate and weather science. Another said dismantling it is like taking a sledgehammer to the keystone holding up our understanding of this planet. Colorado's governor says this will cost lives, weaken disaster response, and hand a competitive edge to foreign adversaries. Not to mention 800 jobs are now in limbo, along with decades of research infrastructure at risk. And all of this is happening while our country faces more extreme storms, fires, fires, floods, and heat than ever before. See, to me, this isn't even about politics. It's about whether we choose science or we choose ignorance when the warnings are blaring. So please do me this favor, spread the word, help us make noise, leave a comment below letting us know your thoughts on Trump shutting down the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and tell us your thoughts on climate and environmental issues. Okay, Ben, back to you.
You start analyzing this stuff as well. The redactions themselves weren't even done with the appropriate redaction software. So you could see underneath the redactions if you copy and pasted it and then put it in a Word document. If you take the PDF, so here's an example of something that causes a great deal of concern. There's this complaint that's listed, and it talks about how defendants, Epstein, actively obstructed law enforcement by denying investigators access to Little St. James beyond its boat dock. Okay, well then everything else is redacted. So you want to see what those redactions say? Go to 203, 204, 205. Defendants, referring to Epstein and Ghislaine, also attempted to conceal their criminal sex trafficking and abuse conduct by paying large sums of money to participant witnesses, including by paying for their attorney's fees and case costs and litigation relating to this conduct. 204. Epstein also threatened to harm victims and helped release damaging stories about them to damage their credibility when they tried to go public with their stories of being trafficked and sexually abused. 205. Epstein also instructed one or more of Epstein Enterprise participant witnesses to destroy evidence relating to ongoing court proceedings involving defendants' criminal sex trafficking and abuse conduct. So who are all these other people? Where are those documents? Where are those statements? All of that is still being covered up right now. And meanwhile, you have that Department of Justice account attacking journalists who are saying, why are you, remember the Larry Nassar letter, the purported letter from Epstein to Larry Nassar saying that, they like young nubile girls and that the president also has a liking for young nubile girls and grab snatch and we got snatched in prison or whatever the hell it says. It was a disgusting, grotesque letter, right? So a reporter, Jamie Dupree, says, so why is the DOJ publicly releasing something that's fake? Your answer, please, because the DOJ posts, the FBI has confirmed that the alleged letter from Epstein to Larry Nassar is fake. It's a fake letter that was received, okay? A few points there. Why wouldn't you release the FBI handwriting analysis that was requested back in 2020 to be done to that letter to see if it was Epstein's letter? The DOJ responds, because the law requires us to release all documents related to Jeffrey Epstein in our possession. So that's what we're doing, you dope. Are you suggesting we break the law? They've already broken the law. It required everything be produced on December 19th. It's also horrific that the DOJ account is calling them a dope. But I want to show you something pretty incredible. So just stick with me. And again, make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. So Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorney, who's now the deputy attorney general, the number 2 at the DOJ. Here's what he says. There has been lots of sensationalism and even outright lies these past few days about the Epstein files. But let's separate fact from fiction. Document production is just that. We produce documents, and sometimes this can result in releasing fake or false documents because they simply are in our possession because the law requires this. Case in point, the so-called Epstein letter to Nassar is clearly fake, it says, which we don't know that to be the case. But do you remember what Donald Trump, MAGA Mike, Todd Blanche, and Pam Bondi have been saying all along? What they've been saying is that they will only be releasing credible evidence. That was one of their constructs, that yes, we will produce the credible evidence. And so here's Donald Trump saying that on July 16, 2025. Play this clip.
Well, I don't know. I can't speak about him, but I can say that Pam Bondi, I really think that she's done very good. She says, I gave you all the credible information. And if she finds any more credible information, she'll give that too. What more can she do than that? I mean, honestly, what more can she do? And we do have bigger problems. You know, we have problems with millions of illegal people that came in here and they're killers and murderers. We have 11,888 murderers that were allowed into our country by Biden, sleepy Joe Biden, stupid Joe Biden.
And here's MAGA Mike saying that as well, that they're only going to release the credible evidence. Play this clip.
But, Mr. Speaker, it's not just Republicans supporting this. It's 11, not just Democrats, it's 11 Republicans as well. Let me just ask you, because I hear you saying that, yes, the files should be made public while protecting the victims. Let me just ask you, though, should all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein be released and made public?
Yes, I agree with President Trump, with the Department of Justice, with the FBI, that you need all credible evidence and information out there. That word credible is important. And why? Because you have to protect innocent people's names and reputations whose names might be, as you noted at the outset of the program, intertwined into all these files. This has been a long legal process. There's a reason, for example, that grand jury materials are protected under the federal rules of criminal procedure, because they're not to be put out. See, the Massey and Khanna discharge petition would require the release. They would require the DOJ and FBI to release information that they know is false, that is based on lies and rumors, and was not even credible enough to be entered into the court proceedings. And that would be a dangerous thing. Our main concern here, though, is the protection of the innocent victims. I mean, these are minors in many cases who were subjected to unspeakable crimes, abject evil. They've already suffered great harm. We do not need their names being unmasked.
So let's also look at this from a logical perspective. Like, let's just assume that even though they've said they're going to release the credible evidence, and then they're like, well, look, we've read the Epstein law and it requires us to turn over absolutely everything. Okay. Well, then why in your document production would the first documents you turn over be the ones that you claim are fake, right? Wouldn't you probably have, like, if I were to do a production and there were ones that were like pranks or whatever, unless I was trying to like actively deceive the other side, which is improper, why would I put the fake ones kind of first? Like, they violated the law by not turning over the records on time, right? It was due. They didn't meet the deadline. And now they're saying, they're confessing that there's 1.2 million more documents, which I believe are records. So I believe it's actually like 5 to 10 million. After the MeidasTouch reports, they confess that there's more. Fine. Why wouldn't you prioritize the real stuff, the FBI interviews, the witness interviews, before you threw in the fake documents? Unless all of this is one big gigantic cover-up, a criminal cover-up. And that's what I believe all of this is. You know, whether the letter is accurate or not, what the Trump regime wants to do is cover this all up and cast doubt on everything. Now, this is fake, that's fake, this is fake, this is AI. The same way that Donald Trump says, I've never been on Epstein's plane, never been on the plane. Of course you've been on the plane. No, you've been on the plane so many times. So anyway, interesting confession, but it followed, stunning confession, incriminating confession, which, by the way, follows the MeidasTouch reporting. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million, and thanks so much for watching.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.